All right, so I made a video about intimacy just now before I went and got my coffee with my friend here. And he had some questions that he wanted to ask me about it. So we'll see where this video takes us.
You spoke about intimacy and honesty, being intimately connected. Without a person being honest with themselves, what they're sharing is their mask, their falseness.
Right.
So there's no real person there touching anyone.
Yeah.
Real or unreal.
Right.
So if a person's not being true to themselves, and granted, in this world today, that's a sliding scale, and for God's sake, we don't want to be judgmental, we don't know what the core is, but we're all aiming for that. But it was really nice, the video, and it made me look at several of my relationships through the lens of some things we were discussing. One of the things you said is that you've always been a very frank and honest and, in that sense, very intimate person, because those are related. And I know about your history, and I have to say you're probably the most honest and intimate, meaning you share yourself. I'm not talking intimate in terms of sexual terms. That's physical intimacy, just the general intimacy. You share yourself as well as you can, and I've watched because we've worked together and we've known each other. So I've watched different people with different capacities for naturalness. You interact, and of course, the people they're most natural with, you're most animated. But that's true. Anyone's going to be more animated with someone who's really natural and at ease. And but you raised some points that in some of your relationships, when people realize just how honest and natural you are, they start to want to be more that. They start to become more that way themselves. And then they see that being that way is something that concerns them, because their friends are still working on a more practiced social pattern. And the way they are is not coming necessarily from their gut, from their heart, from their soul. The way you talk naturally with people, which nearly anyone that gets in relationship with you that is willing to brave being honest, and it's not like you're not talking about shit. There's nothing. It's just this naturalness that's there. And you're saying you had encountered that people found it difficult to try and live in two worlds. The world they normally lived in and the world with you. And because the world they normally live in is massively a less intimate world, more superficial, the world we call the world. So it made me, in your video, I'm looking at how, as a young man, how I approached this, because from day one I was very like you. And I remember high school, junior high school, I was much more frank, much more honest, and it got me lots of points. But I also saw how people, I experienced lots of things, but the biggest thing I was going to ask you about is, like, or talk to you about, go back and forth.
Okay.
My wife that I was married to, she's now deceased, and married her many years ago. I was thinking about how from the start we made this sort of pact to always be honest, that intimacy and honesty are deeply connected. We may not use that words, but that was the intention. And then it occurred to me how slowly but surely I saw myself getting sort of bioengineered into what she wanted me to be, and less what I naturally was.
Yeah.
I like that word, bioengineered, but it's so subtle. Little pieces here and there. I'll just try and...
Right. Like little things where it's gonna be so much drama involved in like trying to like hold my ground here, hold my boundary or whatever it is.
On little things.
Yeah, on little things. But the little things are really, really important, because they're important because it's kind of like this proverb about, two Buddhists, and they're like walking along a river, and then like one Buddhist, the older Buddhist monk, like, he's sees a woman and she needs to be like carried across the river or something, and so he doesn't like bat an eye at that, and he carries her across the river, and then like the younger one is like a few like miles down the road, he's like, oh, you've like defiled yourself by touching a woman, you're not supposed to touch a woman. And the older guy
carried across the river.
Yeah, he carried across the river, and he said, well, yeah, but you've been carrying her like for the last like 3-4 miles. I only carried her across the river. Like, you've been carrying her in your mind like for way longer than I ever did. So like that kind of like is what I mean by like why it's the little things matter. Like the little like things where we don't assert ourselves authentically in a relationship, and where we just kind of like, oh fuck, I want to avoid this drama, because those plates, they keep spinning, and those little things that we like, that were little things to begin with, now it's not like we forget that we like did something against ourselves, against our fundamental, sort of sense of self and our autonomy and our, feeling of what is right. We remember that, and that becomes, more and more painful the more you carry those little things around, because they don't just go away. They stay in your head and they like nag at you, and you feel like you're not, being true, because you're like wanting to save the relationship over, having to just be like, hey, like this doesn't work for me,
And in my case, it's perfect.
Mm-hmm. And
it's so small.
Yeah.
You don't even see the relationship.
Right. It's so small that you like kind of just like sweep it under the rug.
And you give in.
Because, and that's like a lot of times, like that's the premise of the relationship, is that we don't realize, oh, this person is not interested. Like there's like this, unspoken realization that happens. Oh, this person is not really interested in me, like they really don't, it's not reciprocal, in the sense that they can't carry things that are inconvenient about me in them, because I'm sort of like here to pander to them in some way. And yeah, so that, and and that's sort of like where codependence like starts to happen, because it's not just one person doing it to the other person. It's like both people are sort of like using each other in these ways.
This
of
gets
like,
more into gameplay than intimacy.
Right. And now you're both sort of serving as a symbol for the other person of like, so that they can say, hey, I have a relationship with this person. But it's not really a real relationship. You're using each other to like have these battles where you're not really looking at yourself. And so you're using them to say, hey, it's you, it's because of you that I can't be who I want to be. No, it's because the truth is no, you can be who you want to be, but you have to like face that might mean that they will walk away. And, like that's what a real boundary is, it's not, it's like a boundary is something we say, hey, if you cross this line, like that won't work for me, and if you need to walk, then that's what you need to do, because you need to be who you need to be, and I need to be who I need to be. And, if we can't be honest about that, then, there's no point in us like having a codependent relationship where it's just like, we're both sort of just using each other, and, and it's like you're always like sort of hoping that the other person will take the high road at some point, but no, that's never going to happen, because, it's like, it's sort of like up to you to be the leader. Both people have to kind of be the leader in the relationship. It's not just up to one person. You know, both, you know, if one person decides to be the leader, but the other person says, well, you're the leader now and I'm going to follow you. Well, that's always going to like create resentment in the follower, you know, because they're always going to be like, well, I'm doing everything that you're telling me to. And, you know, it's like, I don't like it anymore. You should be like more considerate of me. And then it's like, okay, but you haven't like, you don't disclose what it is that would work for you, honestly. And you're just like attacking me to like get me to figure out something about you that you don't really haven't looked at squarely enough to like want to give it to yourself. So you're like using me as a tool to say, hey, I can't do all these things because you won't let me. No, it's like, you know, we're adults, you know. It's like, yes, you might have chosen a partner that doesn't let you do certain things, but if that is the case, then maybe you need to look at, okay, what are the things that I don't want to, you know, what are the things that I'm saying that I want to do that they won't let me do? If they were actually gone, would I still want to do them, or would I come up with some other reason for why I can't fucking do those things?
Oh, because you might have a division in yourself on that
right.
stuff.
Yeah, that's right. So,
but you still might want to blame them.
So yeah, like that's like in this book that we, you know, have been reading, the games that people play, you know, like often like what people will do is they'll find a partner that like stands in the way of their fulfillment, or, you know, on the surface. And it's both true that the partner does, and it's also true that the reality is that they don't actually want the thing that they say that they're wanting.
That's it. So
yeah.
I want to, okay, we shift
right.
over to that a little bit.
So that's, I don't know, like, yeah.
I want to go back
right.
to honesty and intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
Was what you were saying is
mm-hmm.
essentially, I really like the structure of it. I told you about,
mm-hmm.
I think about a week or so after we got married, we got the pictures back from our wedding.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going through them and I'm just overwhelmed with how beautiful. This is one of the finest weddings. I hated weddings.
Mm-hmm.
But because I hated weddings, and my wife sort of hated weddings, we designed, you know, a wedding that everyone would love. Mm-hmm. Everyone. There's something about it that would be so, an intimacy with the people there. It was no longer a wedding about something to please the bride or
mm-hmm.
please the groom.
Right.
This is a celebration of two people that want to try out, because that's what it is every time. It's why you exchange rings. You're making promises because you were not accustomed to being in that locked in commitment. So mm-hmm. this was, it was really fantastic. And then by these pictures really showed it, because everyone's faces literally beamed. Mm-hmm. And I'd never seen myself as handsome. You know, the white tux, and then my wife, my God, she was never more beautiful than that day.
Mm-hmm.
And then that evolved into, she had this charming little girl, spacey quality that most of her friends found very easy to forgive.
Mm-hmm.
Because there wasn't too much serious consequences to it.
For that, because it's not like the stakes are very high when it's just like a superficial
little things.
Acquaintance.
But she loved the pictures, and she had really, one of her really good friends was the hairdresser that did her hair. He says, I want to see
mm-hmm.
your pictures. So she went to go buy. She said, I'm going to just say the woman's name is Joanne. I can't remember her name, and I don't want to say her name.
Right.
She said, I want to go show these to Joanne. I said, before you take these, I want all of the negatives put in a separate envelope. Why? I don't want you to lose them. I'm not going to lose them. Now, that's the first argument. Mm-hmm. I said what I want,
right.
And she said I'm not going to lose them. As though I'm accusing her of being a space case. And she's a space case. She is, I think the right word is a fucking space case.
Right.
Was. Like she's gone now.
Yeah.
But she gave me shit, and I'm thinking, oh, well, whatever.
Yeah.
And so...
You don't want to...
So Joanne, the hairdresser, says, I don't have time. Here, let me take them. I'll look at them tonight, because there's so many of them. She takes them home, and her husband had whatever his business was in one portion of the house. And she was in there because he had the lighting that she could see. She left him in there, and that part of the house got on fire that night, and all of our pictures burned.
Right.
I actually had the feeling that something's going to go wrong, you know, if I don't save these. And I trusted my feeling. I asserted my feeling. And she she just showed me now we're married, and suddenly there's this little extra assertion I hadn't seen before.
Oh, right. Yeah.
She's arguing.
Of like, now you like,
So
you're in my world.
Now
little boy.
I'm getting to where I want to go.
Yeah.
I found that relationships started to be less about honesty and more about competing for who's boss.
Oh God, yeah.
Who's in charge?
Right. Yeah.
But where there's fear that the person's not going to get what they want, so they start asserting what they want and a little bit extra.
Yeah.
A little bit, just a little bit, and then tedious little statements that put down the other person's assertion. You know where I'm going.
And the interesting thing about like this competition for who the boss is,
yes,
it's often like the person, they're not the person saying, well, you're always like, making all the decisions, and you're the one who's in charge. Like the person who is saying that, they don't realize that they're sort of leading from behind, with their, because they're putting the person into like a position of authority that was not asked for. And now like they're actually sort of pushing the person to make decisions and to sort of think for both people. So like on the one hand, they want the person to take charge and be the leader. But on the other hand, they want to control what the leader does, So who's really in charge? It's the person who's like, saying, "Hey, I'm just a follower here, like I don't make any decisions." But at the same time, they're like sort of, forcing the other person to sort of like make the decisions that they don't want to make. So they're like actually the one who sort of like is in control of like the tempo,
right?
If you want to think of it in terms of like a dance or like martial arts, they're like in the they're the ones who are like in control of like what direction things will take. And if like if it's like like you come to them and you say, hey, let's do this, and then they like argue with you, well, no, I don't want to do that, and then you're like, oh fuck, well now I have to come up with something else, and then you like have to like come up with a long list of like, okay, well, will this work? And then it's like, no. Will this work? Well, maybe. And then it's like, will this work?
And suddenly
okay, finally,
you're selling yourself.
Yeah, but then they say, but you're the one who you're the one who like
is in charge.
Is the one who's in charge because you're the one who's like had the idea or whatever. But they're the ones who are just like vetoing like everything.
So honesty's out the window here.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So that's what I thought. Where does honesty get compromised? Is in the conflict of wills.
Yeah.
And the conflict of wills is where the conflict of will is already in the person. So you were giving an example of a woman who really, I think, let's just say she really wanted to go study dance. Mm-hmm. And her husband was objecting to it. So she says, I can't go dance because my husband won't let me do it.
Right.
And then it turns out the husband said it'd be okay.
Okay, fine.
And then she doesn't go dancing because she herself had over all of her other reasons.
She goes dancing and then she realized
she didn't really want to.
I don't really want to, yeah.
But she is blaming him all that time.
Right.
When the conflict of wills is when the will is already conflicted within each person. It looks like relationships are often battlegrounds of two divided people.
Yeah, like people who like they find the person who will sort of disallow them, will make it easier for them to not face the thing that they're divided about, like the desire that they're divided about, so that they can continue to have like the sort of like the relationship with the desire and see themselves, oh, I'm a person who really wants this thing, while also feeling secure that they will never get the thing because they have the person in their life that will block them from getting that thing.
Yes.
And it's sort of a convenient, it's kind of like smoke and mirrors, but
now shift
very interesting.
I want to shift to this. So we've got, you said relationship, honesty and intimacy are there. So when it starts to be a battle of wills, this is where honesty becomes extra important. So I was thinking of I've known you for many years, and I know we've worked together for many years, and I noticed that people of the same sex, they don't have quite the battles as what happens in the mating relationship. Right. And so for you and I, we're both very self-assured with regard to how we think something should be done. So time and time again, we have run into, I think it should be done this way. You say, I think it should be done this way.
Right.
Each and every time, we basically no one has to feel like they've been minimally, that they've been bullied.
Yeah.
Because I say, I think it should be done this way. And then you say, is it really that important? Let me just try and I'll show it to you. And then the damnedest thing.
Yeah.
You're right so often that,
Yeah.
of course, I'm much more less so dogmatic that I know the best. That's where honesty is refining.
Yeah. And it's sort of like we definitely like have heated exchanges, and we allow that energy to be there because it's not like we see like the heated exchange as a negative thing. It's
No,
like,
not at all.
it's like, that's where, it's important to have these points of friction in a relationship be expressed because the energy needs to move. So, like the argument is on the surface. It seems like these two people are really like disagreeing with each other. But in reality, like if they're comfortable enough with each other, they get used to each other while they look like they're having a heated, back and forth that looks kind of adversarial to like an onlooker.
Well, here's a good example of this. And I think this is really a healthy, natural thing in all relationships. Right. I'll just take something something we bought. Takes out a box, has to be assembled. I think it needs to be assembled one way. I think it needs to be assembled, and we start having words. The words get heated, and we thought, "Fuck this shit. We're going to go for a walk. This is not important. I mean, this is a minor thing. We're going to get our mind off of it."
Right.
When we went for the walk, each of us had other things that were bothering us that we hadn't talked about. Not bothering us about the other person, just on our mind that was bothering us, and that energy of aggravation that we hadn't had a chance, no space in our life because we're busy. There's a lot of fucking work to do.
Yeah.
But we walked, and you talked about the things that were, and we will go for a 5-mile walk. That's no big deal.
Yeah, and then then I tend to go into like, okay, well these, some of the things that were bothering me that were kind of like creating added, because there's often like added, when you're like in a working relationship with somebody and it gets heated, it's usually that it's more annoying to fucking do logistics with somebody else when there's something else like bothering you.
That could be about anything.
Yeah, and then so like if you are allow yourself to be self-aware enough that is a reality that we can't like really push our emotions down. That sometimes and most relationships will not afford us this, unfortunately. But if we have a friend that we're close enough with, that we work with, if we can, like honestly, like sort of disclose, and if we don't have that, then we can sort of disclose, go for a walk and like, think it over in our heads and think of, what's like really bothering me? Like maybe I should like sort of think this through and maybe even like talk about it out loud to myself to see like, what is it that was like creating more friction inside my head while I was like trying to do this work that was like annoying to do because I have this backlog of emotional energy that is like where I'm like sort of trying to like make some emotional adjustment in myself.
And in my relationship with listening to you talk, I often found it didn't matter what was bothering you. Could reach into the bother bucket.
Yeah.
And pull out a crab that didn't get pulled back in the bucket by the other crabs.
Yeah. And
crack it open and we'd eat it. Meaning you might come up with how your dad did some shit when you were 12 years old.
Yeah. And well, the other thing is like, you need to like, because sometimes you won't know exactly what's bothering you. And so what you need to do is give yourself the latitude to just like grab something out of the air and just say, think about, okay, well, maybe this is bothering me, and you just kind of guess. You go with your best guess, and then you kind of like, that gives your emotional body like something to work on, and it may very well be something like that is actually related to the subject that comes to your mind. But, like we've had another friend who unfortunately passed away a few years ago. It was very difficult to, he would get really heated and then he would sort of become kind of,
go into
withdrawn,
lockdown.
And then he would just be fuming, and you couldn't really talk to him about stuff because he wouldn't like grab something out of the air and say, hey, this is bothering me, I want to talk about this. He would just say, I'm bothered that I'm bothered, because it's like
And that's the final
because
word.
in his family, you don't talk about those things, So, he intellectually sort of like, because, we had a very close relationship and close working relationship with him. We were really good friends with him. And, he was, he developed over the years and became more open, but he really had some really deep programming that was like, you don't, you're not allowed to even look at something that is
So you're
emotionally uncomfortable, because
yeah, you're conditioned by him to tiptoe.
Essentially, because it's like, like that fucking bullshit saying that says, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. That's sort of like the ethic that he came from.
That's exactly
and
it.
That is horrendously abusive way to really look at communication, because communication is there for a reason. Our talking is not just to give each other information. It is there for us to move energy. It's kind of like our genitalia. It serves two functions. One is for procreation, and the other is for taking a piss. So that is sort of like our vocal cords are both for conveying information accurately when it's needed in an environment where it's very important that the details get taken care of, but it's also to essentially emotionally take a piss.
Yeah, to vent.
To vent.
I had a friend who said, "What's the problem?" I said, "You need to learn to emotionally toilet."
Right, and this is where people get hung up on logic versus emotion. They think it's, that you're so emotional, you're not logical. No, the rationality behind emotions is not within the actual thing that is being said. It is within the energy that is being expressed, and it's more important that the energy is expressed, and that is very rational. It's a very rational thing to do when you understand like what communication is for. It is to be expressive. Like it's like, why do we dance? It's not because it's logical, because like
the life moves us.
Yeah, it's just like your body needs to move, and it needs to be creative, and it like says things in a different realm than just being like a stone flat affect person who can't won't allow themselves to do anything that isn't quote unquote rational, because they don't understand that because they don't understand the greater forces at work within our human nervous system.
So you're saying this one of the greatest friends we've ever had on the face of this earth.
Yeah.
So sweet, so kind, but had that dis-ease with feeling ill at ease with ill ease.
Right.
So he couldn't be honest with his voice.
Yeah.
Meaning he couldn't. He just would lock it down. You're not allowed to say anything. Like, that pissed me off. So when if you remember, when the building, we work in the same building, he locks the door. Sometimes he could go around and curse for 5 minutes, just fuck, whatever, and he'd feel so much better. But it would be the rare occasion. But in relationships where it becomes two people are living together side by side in the bed, at the breakfast table, at the dinner table, boy, is it important there.
Yeah, and another thing is like one of his fears, I think, or a general fear that comes up when like you're talking about your history and your trauma. It's like you're split in your mind, because you're like, part of you is trying to be like loyal to the absolute truth, and you're like trying to like be you're trying to both be a good like advocate for the person who like offended you and like yourself. And so like I used to have this problem that I'd have a hard time to really like get my emotions out, because like I wanted to be really honest that I'm not painting somebody else in a worse light than was the reality. But when you're not communicating sort of directly to that person, you're just venting, you need to like sort of let yourself fully be your own advocate. You can't like try to manage both things at the same time of like trying to be super truthful and honest about, like, well, did they really do this? Did they really do that? Was this really their intention? Maybe they had like good reasons for doing it that way. Like when all you really need to do is just like, how did it fucking impact you? And you do want to like be specific and sort of factual in that, but it's more important that you're emotionally like vigorously like discharging the feeling, and you allow the feeling
to find its way.
To find its way by sort of grabbing at things and guessing, doing your best guess of like, well, because feelings they're in sort of a different language than, the word brain, than the language brain. The feeling, so that is why it can be difficult to express feelings, because, feelings sort of, you can only, by using words, you can only like sort of allude to the feeling. So that's why you have to kind of guess to fully express a feeling, because feelings themselves are not, words. Words are words. Feelings are feelings. And words can somewhat triangulate the feeling, but what the feeling, needs is to be expressed outwardly.
Yes, and I think, but what women, where they need to be applauded, and I don't think they do. They have the challenge. We have the difficult world to be a woman in. But generally, women can get together and they're more flowing with their feelings and talking about them than men are.
Yeah, that's
and
correct.
So you're speaking about a dear friend of ours whose life was shortened because he kept the shit in that needed to come out.
Yeah.
My wife's life was shortened because she didn't find the right way to do that. And then we had, so one of the things you told me when I told you about my wife and the photographs, you said, so did you tell her later how you felt about it? Well, it was like a little late, and I said, what I told myself is to let it go. When you asked me about it, and now you and I have we have a common way of looking at our feelings. We actually will sit and just be with those feelings for maybe a half hour. That's our meditation sometimes.
Right.
To just be with how it feels in our body.
Right.
And had I done that, then I would have had less resentment for her.
Yeah.
But it's because the resentment was there.
Yeah.
I couldn't stop the resentment. The fucking space case told me, it'll be all right. No, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry. She fucked it up. And with the irretrievable.
And it didn't really, she like fucked it up because it wouldn't have cost her anything to like put the photo negatives like somewhere safe.
In a different envelope.
And it was like this willfulness of like, hey, I do whatever the fuck.
Don't try and control.
I do whatever the fuck I want. This my autonomy. This is sort of a funny sort of thing that people do, is like they make their autonomy dependent on other people
submitting,
being submissive. But what does that do? It makes their autonomy dependent on the other person's submission. So no autonomy, no real autonomy.
No one ever said it like that. I've never heard that. It's fantastic.
Right.
So, but it's understandable. We just got married, and people after they get married have that fear.
Yeah.
That they're going to get swallowed up by having to please the other person. So you sort of make preemptive strikes. No. Yeah. You just start saying no, like a little 2-year-old. No. I'll be all right. Fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But so going to what happened is then I told you about, there's a time when we separated, my wife and I separated, and she's gone now out of town for a year. It didn't end our relationship, but she's out of town for a year, and I realized one day, I was vacuuming the carpet, beautiful Persian rug, and I had never noticed that it was a Persian rug. I'd never noticed the exquisite colors that were stitched in as a genuine Persian rug. The vivid colors, I just never noticed it. I went out, and then I had a car that time. There was a 20-year-old car that I'd kept in perfect condition, maintained inside out. The paint was in, so I went ahead and did the polishing compound and waxed it. And my God, I never noticed that this color is so rich. And all day long, the colors were so vivid. And I remember I was driving downtown, and it's fall, and there's the leaves. Oh my God, they're beautiful. And I see a clock tower with the red tile on it, And I said to myself, and this is a very important thing that you said, ask yourself questions.
Right. Yeah.
I said, what is going on? Why am I seeing color like this? And in that moment, then I had my brain, I had to pull over. It had flashbacks of 100 ways that I'd compromised with this wife, this woman. And I use that word, this woman, where she aggressively demanded it be her way.
Right.
But they were little things.
Yeah.
Little things.
Right.
The mountain gets turned into the desert from the wind just a little bit each day. And so in relationships, and so any one of them, if I put them out, you'd say, well, that's reasonable. That's so you yielded on that. So that's reasonable. What I saw is I ended up and stopped seeing color.
Yeah.
And when she was out of town, and I know she's not going to be back for at least a year. I don't know what's causing the lights to go on and off, but it's okay. It was amazing. So what I'm pointing at is our friend, he died because and then my wife, she died because there's feelings she didn't deal with. We just lost someone else really dear to us.
Yeah.
Whose life didn't have to end so quickly.
Right.
But she refused to do the medical recommendations.
Physical therapy.
The physical therapy and the other therapies, and she decided she didn't need to eat.
Right. And and it was like she was able to maintain her life as long as her body was healthy enough. But once, and sort of her insular sort of personality that didn't really, like where she was the, she would, often like it's just like she didn't take in information, she wouldn't take in new information, and it's like whenever we like had a conversation, like we loved her and she was like very dear, filled with life, very charming,
brilliant,
very brilliant, charismatic, very, did some really marvelous things in the world. But, in our personal relationships, she didn't really have a lot of interest in listening to other people, or, she sort of always had to be like the authority, like the ultimate like authority. And if anything, and so that sort of worked for her when her brain was still functional enough to take care of herself, but when her brain started getting some glitches, she needed to allow herself to be more dependent on other people who were
cooperate
like her,
with good advice.
Right, with her caregivers.
Just hear it.
Yeah, and so like that, because that pattern was there of non-cooperativeness, like later on in her life, that interfered with her really getting the care that she needed, because she just kind of blocked everything that didn't make sense to her. Like, so,
and you said,
and we have to respect, people's autonomy, and, doesn't, like
you tuned into her one day and you said some marvelous things about her. You said, there's just a few feelings. If she could just say those feelings,
right,
she'd be free.
Yeah.
She could think more clearly.
Right.
Everything would settle out. But and then you said why you felt that she
Right.
wasn't saying them, and it was perfectly reasonable. Yeah. But this goes back to, you did a video on. Okay, I'm not as accustomed to saying fuck as you are, but the fucking ego will kill you.
Right. Yeah, it will kill you.
If it thinks it will survive.
Yeah.
By its decisions.
Like, because it stakes its autonomy on, its life on its autonomy. It doesn't really serve life so much. It just like wants to be
its existence.
Yeah. When it like takes too deep of a root inside of you, it like tries to control everything, and then it doesn't really allow other people to interact with it, and then it just kind of like leads to the person's death, because it's like, you have to.
So we've had many examples of this.
Yeah.
I mean, we actually seen too many than we don't want to know.
Yeah, I mean, like the ego seems to be the most common cause of death.
So when I lost the vision, it's a really, it's a martyrdom thing. In my case,
yeah,
I sacrificed my body's ability to see color,
right,
because the color stimulates feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not realizing I'm not dealing with my feelings. I'm telling myself, oh,
Right.
just put it.
You're shutting down the current.
I just said,
life.
oh, I'm going to accept this. I'm going to accept this.
Yeah.
I didn't accept it.
Right.
It wasn't acceptable. I still
Right.
felt sick to my stomach.
Right.
But when you and I got together, that's one of the things that was common to us. We wanted to talk about the shit that happened in our lives.
Yeah.
And it just changed each of us individually.
Mm-hmm.
And we have other friends where we've had good. I'm thinking of someone in Germany that's really fun to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. So this honesty thing, it's like the self honesty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, intimacy begins with being honest with yourself, and that sounds sort of easy on the surface, but most people, they like the deception because they think the deception is part of, like, somehow that's how they'll get their fulfillment, and they like the illusion. And a lot of times people want the illusion more than they want the image that is the reality of, like, what the illusion would turn into if it was the reality. So by turning making the illusion a reality, that sort of like defeats the real intention, because the real intention is, oh, I just need this pretty image to, like, I don't actually want I don't want it in, like, real life. No, I just want to maintain this image and seeing myself as wanting it, because that's part of, like, my ego identity of somebody, who wants this thing.
Yes. I'm trying to think of the names of the words that identify. There's the non-egoistic relationship where two people really communicate honestly to the very best of their ability and hold values that they're consistent with so that the other person can rely on those values, but values that are mutually agreeable.
Right, yeah.
Held fast to.
Yeah, and it's not like the values are derived from, like, when somebody was, under, like, duress or something. It's not like, the one person felt smaller, so they felt like they had to agree to values that they really didn't.
So when you brought up this last video on equating honesty with intimacy, and then you're talking about relationships and how you need to be yourself.
Right.
And we're talking about how much, in an unspoken way, how much you've compromised that.
Right. Yes.
And immediately you got me by the short hairs, because that's what I've done my entire life.
Yeah, we make ourselves small because we don't want to be alone,
And we don't want to be offensive when we want to say
and we
we feel.
We want to keep the peace, and that has its, like, there's a nuance here. There is times when it's good to keep the peace, but that needs to be contingent upon, like, hey, we'll talk about it later, like, right now is not a good time, so, like, let's just be peaceful. Like, but if we're going to have a close relationship, then we need to make sure, like, that, if this feeling persists, then, we don't just, like, go around and sulk, because that just creates passive aggressive behavior.
And then you and I have a series of people, each of us our own line of people we're friends with. And on a level of having to, we provide them a service, they provide us with a service. There's superficial friendship, but I can name, like, people right in a row where you have feelings that they don't want to hear, of things they've done and how they've been in relationship to you, which was, I've observed it, bullshit, disrespectful, willful, judgmental, righteous, and always placed carefully, like, sandwiched between kindnesses,
and
little
like,
pieces,
and under the flag of, like, social acceptability.
And everyone knows. Everyone knows this is the way it should be done. And you are this, and in each of these cases, and I'm going to be just explicit because I'm just thinking of, like, half a dozen people. Jealousy, wanting you to see yourself as less when you were not parading yourself. Because there's the one thing you don't do. I mean, you're a shy man.
Yeah. People often, like, I think they mistake, frankness for, like, arrogance and conceitedness. Like, well, why is this, like, guy talking so, like, directly, like why is he allowed to do that? Like who made him elected him to be in that, position? But, like for me, it's just like, well, fuck, it's like hard to do anything else.
So in each of these people, what I saw was no matter what you would say to them that might even begin to say your point of view, they're arguing from the get-go, and you just stop.
Yeah.
And then they actually get just shoved out the door.
Right. Because
gently. You no point did they see any hostility.
Yeah.
None.
Yeah.
But they just don't get to have access to you.
Yeah.
But it hurts you.
Yeah, it does. It does.
I mean, deeply, because you actually love these people.
I would say it has, but I'm learning to not take it so personal, and I'm learning that, because I don't really want superficial relationships like this where, people, want to take a dump on you and then, say, hey, what's wrong? Those are just, there's like a certain place that they can have it in my life, but not, they don't get behind the walls of the castle, so to speak.
And then there's this one woman that recently died.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the one person in her life that she's closest with for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to observe that she was able to freely express her feelings to me and really vent to me.
Right.
In ways that was a real release for her. Maybe by calling me an asshole. But where she knows she's not really trying to cause a wound.
Yeah.
She's just she knows that I know that.
Right. She would like insult you and stuff and
then smile.
And she would smile, and you knew, like I always knew that, not to take that personal, because like there was, that's like the best that she could do to be intimate, is because what she's really doing is she's like calling herself an asshole in essence, and she's saying it with a big grin because she's like saying, hey, you're an asshole like me, so it's okay, like I'm calling you an asshole, but you're just you're being assertive and you're making sure that my needs are being taken care of, and that's fucking obnoxious, but
that's like because of her dependency on me.
At the same time, it's like we could feel that who would she want to be in her life? She's being polite to everyone else and friendly to everyone else, but you are the one that she, with all the insults and stuff, you would be the one that she would trust, because you were the one who's like honest and like making sure she gets the
and I didn't
care that
feel
she needs.
Any poison.
Right.
None.
Yeah.
Whereas some of the people that I've had to sort of keep on the outside of the door, they'd say something to me where there was poison in it.
Yeah.
And now I never call them out on it, because I don't have time for arguments. If I'm going to be argued with, it's over. It depends on what the relationship is. What's my level of dependency with?
Right, and it's like you're not gonna argue with people that you don't really fucking like. I don't want these people around. Like, why do I don't give a fuck what they think. It's like I'm not gonna. I'm not. It's not my responsibility like to upgrade your delusions. And if you're gonna fight tooth and nail from me delivering something that would help you improve your life, like.
It's just an offer.
It's like it's too much work,
Just an actual offer. Like, do you want this? You might have something to just give away. Do you want this? And then they want to engage. Well, no, I don't really. And then they insult you.
And then they insult you, and then they like want to like, oh, what are your credentials? It's like, I don't fucking know. I just know these things, and if you don't want them, you don't have to have them.
I was thinking one of them he delivered you to the airport, and he just. When he's not going to see you for a while, all of a sudden he shows a sweetness he'd never shown you. When he saw that you're not going to be there, and he's not going to have your energy, I'd never seen him be more sincere, genuine, warm. And so that was really interesting. You know how people are, but it's like maintaining. We're talking about the games people play. When are they going to be themselves, and when are they going to assume some sort of hurtful role? So these were all relate to intimacy and honesty.
Yeah.
It's not a simple subject, and yet it's about as simple as it is.
Right. Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, it's like, we all carry the same wound. We carry it. We're born sort of like in God consciousness, and then, we're separated from God. because we sort of make compromises that take us further and further away from the self. And then, at some point we're so far away from the self that we just feel really uncomfortable in our bodies. And we forget, how to really enjoy life because we're so far away from allowing, that God self to flow naturally through us.
And I go to color blindness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
all sorts of sort of maladies,
How many maladies, that I mean, I don't want to say you were ever maladied, but basically it's through your honesty,
right,
and your choices to be with yourself,
and just kind of making peace with this is my thing that I'm working on. It's like if I fail, it's like it's okay, like God doesn't judge me in that way, like I'm doing everyone is doing the best they can, but it's like when you're on the healing path, you kind of need to be okay with, you're going to fall over and you might fail. So don't make anything contingent. Don't make your confidence contingent upon whether you failed or not. No. Just every opportunity to learn something new, that is worthwhile. Everything that you do to get you back to feeling more like you're being yourself, that's worth it, and you'll make mistakes, but the mistakes are really the great teacher. If you don't make mistakes, then how can you learn? So you gotta let yourself fall on your face. And then
I really enjoyed having this conversation because I think there's a lot more the high points in it that you can pull out and talk about,
right?
But
I think we've covered a lot of ground, and anyhow, I think we can probably conclude it here. All right, so have a good one. We'll leave it here.